Welcome to Alien Watchers, where we dive into the unknown, explore the mysteries of the universe, and uncover the extraordinary. In today's episode, we continue the journey of Caden Korr and his crew aboard the Horizon 7 as they face the ultimate decision. Will they escape the grip of the alien entity, or will they choose to become part of something beyond comprehension? Stay tuned as we explore the terrifying, thrilling unknown. The stars stretched out before Caden, a vast expanse of glowing points scattered across the inky blackness of space. The ship Horizon 7 glided through the cosmos, the hum of its engines a constant companion. It was a routine mission, one that had been planned for years. The goal was simple: explore the unknown reaches of NGC 4171, a distant region near the edge of the Milky Way, and return with data that could change humanity's understanding of the universe. Caden Korr sat in the command center of the ship, his fingers tracing the smooth surface of the console as he reviewed the latest readings. The crew of Horizon 7 was a mix of the brightest minds from across the globe: astrophysicists, engineers, biologists, each brought together to contribute to the mission's success. But as he looked out at the vastness of space, a sense of isolation crept over him. In front of him, a holographic display showed the map of the region they were approaching. But something felt off. The signals they were receiving from the area were erratic, inconsistent. Something about the patterns didn't make sense. It wasn't natural. Caden leaned forward in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the readings. The electromagnetic waves flickered erratically, a chaotic rhythm he couldn't place. There was no obvious explanation for the interference. "Captain, you might want to take a look at this," Caden said, his voice steady, though his mind was racing. The captain, Elena Torres, approached from behind, her boots clicking on the metal floor. She peered over his shoulder at the screen. "That's strange," she murmured. "We've never encountered a signal like this before. It's almost as if something is trying to communicate." Caden nodded, his fingers dancing across the console, adjusting the frequency, trying to get a clearer signal. The words were garbled at first, but then a faint image emerged, distorted but discernible. A shape, pulsing with energy, blinking in and out of existence. It was like nothing they had ever seen. "What the hell is that?" Captain Torres whispered, stepping back. Caden felt a chill run down his spine. "It's not just an anomaly. It's something. Alive." The captain turned to him, her expression serious. "We need to investigate. Bring the team together." Minutes later, the crew had assembled in the main observation room, their faces lit by the faint glow of the display. Each of them wore the same mixture of curiosity and apprehension, and as if they all knew they were standing on the edge of something monumental, but they had no idea what it was. Caden's voice cut through the silence. "I'm sending a probe to scan the signal. We'll get a closer look at whatever's causing this." He activated the probe's release sequence, watching as it detached from the ship and drifted toward the source of the disturbance. The probe's sensors would feed back detailed information, but it would take time. As they waited, the crew silently watched the glowing screen, each person lost in their thoughts. Caden's mind, however, was racing. What if this was a message? A warning? He didn't know, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into the unknown, with no way to predict what might happen next. The minutes stretched on, and then, just as the tension in the room reached its peak, the probe's signal came back, distorted, fragmented, but still clear enough to decipher. "We've got something," Caden said, his voice sharp. "Look." The screen flickered, showing a series of strange symbols, alien in their complexity. They were unlike anything human technology had ever recorded. The crew stared in disbelief, trying to make sense of the incomprehensible. "What do you make of this?" Captain Torres asked, her tone now edged with concern. Caden's fingers flew over the console, attempting to decode the symbols, but they didn't follow any known patterns. He couldn't even recognize the underlying structure. There was no immediate way to translate it. "We need to be careful," Caden said slowly, turning to the crew. "Whatever this is, it's not a normal communication. We might be dealing with someone, far beyond our understanding." As Caden spoke, a low rumble vibrated through the hull of the ship, a shudder, then another. It wasn't the typical noise of a starship passing through space. This felt different. Something was moving outside. The ship's lights flickered as an alarm blared, a shrill tone cutting through the tense silence. "Captain!" "We've lost power to the forward engines," the chief engineer, Ryan Davis, shouted, his voice laced with panic. "Something's pulling us in." Before anyone could react, the entire ship was engulfed in darkness. Caden's heart pounded in his chest as he stumbled to his feet. He reached for the emergency lights, but before he could activate them, the ship lurched violently, throwing him off balance. The walls groaned and buckled as though something immense was pressing against the ship from all sides. "What's happening?" Captain Torres yelled, grabbing hold of a nearby console. A new sound filled the air, soft at first, like a whisper, but growing louder. It was a voice, the same voice from the signal. "Caden," it said, his name echoing in the cold emptiness of space. He froze, his blood running cold. The voice wasn't coming from any comm system. It wasn't human. "It's calling my name," Caden murmured, unable to believe it. "It knows me." "Get to the bridge now," Captain Torres ordered. "We need to regain control." But it was too late. The ship was already spiraling out of control, pulled deeper into the unknown towards something no one had ever anticipated. The ship's systems were in disarray. Lights flickered weakly and alarms blared intermittently, like some dying creature fighting for its last breath. The sharp metallic scent of burned circuits filled the air, mingling with the thick, sterile smell of recycled oxygen. Caden Korr struggled to keep his balance as the Horizon 7 lurched and twisted in space, helpless in the grip of the unseen force that had wrenched it off course. His heart raced in his chest as he stumbled toward the main bridge, his boots slipping on the slick floor. The chaos around him felt like a nightmare come to life. "Caden, get to the bridge! We need you!" Captain Elena Torres shouted, her voice strained with panic. But her words barely reached his ears as he pushed forward, desperate to understand what was happening. The dark expanse of space outside the ship's windows was now filled with an eerie, almost unnatural glow. It was as if the stars themselves had shifted, their light now pulsing in strange rhythms that seemed to match the beating of his own heart. But there was no time to ponder it. Inside the bridge, the crew scrambled to regain control. Ryan Davis, the chief engineer, was frantically tapping at the console, trying to bring the systems back online. Sparks flew from the central panel, and the ship groaned under the strain. "We've lost power to the main engines," Ryan said, his voice tight with frustration. "The backup systems are failing. We're stuck." "Can you fix it?" Captain Torres demanded, her eyes wild with fear. I don't know. We're being pulled into something. I can't stabilize the systems. We've lost too much power." Caden's eyes darted to the console, where the same distorted image from earlier was now visible, a blur of light and movement. The alien signals flickered and pulsed in a way that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "I don't think this is just a malfunction," Caden said, his voice low but firm. "Something is manipulating us. It's not just pulling the ship, it's pulling us." "What do you mean?" Captain Torres demanded, narrowing her eyes at him. "Whatever's causing this, it's not natural. The ship is alive, in some way. The energy is interacting with the ship in ways we don't understand." Caden's fingers moved instinctively across the control panel, activating sensors and scanning for any anomalies in the vicinity. As the systems hummed to life, an alarm rang out, and the display blinked with an unsettling red light. "There's something out there," Caden murmured. "It's moving toward us, and I think it's communicating with us." Suddenly, the entire bridge shuddered violently, knocking everyone off balance. A deep, rumbling sound reverberated through the hull of the ship, as if something massive and unseen was pressing against them. "Brace for impact," Captain Torres yelled, but the words barely left her lips before the ship was struck by an invisible force. The lights flickered and went out completely, plunging them into darkness. A cold silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the heavy breathing of the crew. Caden's heart pounded in his chest as he fumbled for his flashlight, his hands shaking with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Then it came again. A voice. "Caden?" The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it resonated through the empty spaces of the ship. It was both distant and near, as if coming from somewhere inside his own mind. The voice was calm, familiar, but not human. It was the same voice from the signal. He froze, his flashlight beam trembling in his hand. "Who's there?" Caden called out, his voice hoarse. The crew looked at him, confusion and fear written on their faces. No one else had heard it, only him. "It's not just static," he murmured, staring at the flickering console. "It's speaking to me. It's alive." The silence grew deeper, heavier. The ship seemed to be holding its breath, and for a moment, it felt as if the universe itself was waiting for something. "We need to get control back," Captain Torres said, her voice now steady but filled with urgency. "Caden, you're the one who understands the systems. Get us back online, now." Caden turned back to the console, his mind racing. The energy readings were off the charts, unlike anything he'd ever seen. But he knew one thing for sure. Whatever was out there, it wasn't going to stop, and neither was he. "I'm going to try something," he said, his voice resolute. "It might not work, but it's our only shot." He took a deep breath, activating the ship's backup communication system. The flickering light of the control panel illuminated his face as he connected to the external array, the last thread of hope. His fingers hovered over the keys as he sent out a signal, this time not just a broadcast, but a message. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We are human. We come in peace. Please, tell me who you are." For a long moment, there was nothing. The ship was silent, still, as if everything were frozen in time. Then the voice came again. "Caden Korr, you are not alone." Caden's breath caught in his throat. The voice spoke his name again, but this time there was no confusion or distortion. It was clear. It knew him. Before he could process it further, the ship jolted again, this time with such force that it sent Caden sprawling to the floor. The lights flickered once more, and the entire ship groaned in protest. "This isn't happening," Ryan whispered, his face pale. "We're not equipped for this." "What do we do, Caden?" Caden didn't have an answer. He could feel it now, deep in his gut. Something was coming. Something beyond comprehension. "I don't know, but I intend to find out," he said, pulling himself up from the floor. He turned to the crew, his face set with determination. "Get ready. We're not just fighting to survive, we're about to meet whatever is out there." The ship was in a state of limbo. The Horizon 7 drifted, suspended in space, its systems barely functioning, the hum of its life support system the only sound that reminded the crew they were still alive. The vastness of space stretched out beyond the fragile walls of their vessel, an endless void that seemed to consume them with every passing second. Caden sat alone in the command center, his eyes fixed on the flickering console before him. The crew had been trying, desperately trying, to get the ship back online, but each attempt seemed to push them further into the grip of the unknown force that had crippled them. Power was at a minimum, and the systems were failing faster than they could repair them. "Caden," the voice came again, soft and distant, but unmistakable. The same voice that had spoken his name earlier. He couldn't ignore it anymore, couldn't pretend that it was just a malfunction. This was something else, something alive. He leaned forward, pressing his hands against the cold surface of the console. His pulse quickened. "Who are you?" he whispered, but the voice did not respond. Behind him, the doors to the command center slid open with a soft hiss, and Captain Torres entered, her face pale with exhaustion. She hadn't slept in days, and it was starting to show. Her eyes were heavy, her expression strained, but she still held herself with the authority of a leader. "We're getting nowhere," she said, her voice hoarse. "The systems are failing faster than we can fix them. I've sent out distress signals, but we're too far from Earth for anyone to respond in time." Caden didn't look up. "We're not getting out of here that easily." Captain Torres frowned. "What do you mean?" Caden finally turned to face her. "We're not just stranded, we're being pulled." She stared at him, confused. "What do you mean pulled?" "I think it's calling to me," Caden said, his voice low but firm. "The signal, the voice, everything about this, it's like we're being drawn in." "By what?" Captain Torres asked, her voice tinged with both disbelief and desperation. "I don't know," Caden admitted, his hands shaking slightly. "But I think it knows me. It's speaking directly to me, and it wants me to understand." Captain Torres stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Do you think this is some kind of alien intelligence?" "I don't know what it is." What it is, Caden said, standing up now, pacing around the small command center. "But I'm sure of one thing. It's not random. This is intentional." The sound of Ryan Davis's voice crackled through the comms, cutting through their conversation. "Caden, Captain, you need to come to the control room. Now." Caden exchanged a glance with Captain Torres before both of them rushed to the control room. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The crew was gathered around the central console, their eyes fixed on the readings that were now being displayed. Caden's heart sank when he saw them. "We've lost more power," Ryan said, his voice grim. "It's like the ship is being drained from the inside." Caden stepped forward, scanning the data. "This isn't just a power drain," he said, his voice steady but filled with an unsettling certainty. "This is them. The energy from the anomaly, it's feeding off our systems. It's absorbing our power." Captain Torres looked at him, her face a mixture of fear and disbelief. "You mean to say that this thing, whatever it is alive? It's feeding off of us?" Caden nodded. "Yes, and we can't escape it. We're stuck in its grip. The more we try to resist, the more it pulls us in." A heavy silence settled over the room, the weight of the truth sinking in. "Caden," Ryan said, breaking the silence, "what are we supposed to do now? We're out of options. If we don't get power back, we're going to drift forever." For a moment, Caden didn't answer. His mind raced, trying to come up with a plan, any plan. They were running out of time. The ship was dying, and they were stranded in the middle of nowhere. "Wait," Caden said suddenly, his eyes widening as an idea sparked in his mind. "The external array. I can try something. It might be risky, but if I can access the anomaly signal directly, maybe I can break the cycle." Captain Torres looked at him, doubt written across her face. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm not sure about anything right now," Caden said, his voice strained, "but it's the only shot we've got." Without waiting for her response, he turned and hurried toward the external communications station. The crew followed, watching him intently as he worked furiously to override the controls. "I'm going to try to connect directly to the source," Caden muttered, his fingers flying across the panel. "If I can send a pulse strong enough, maybe it will disrupt the signal. We might be able to escape its influence." The room was silent as Caden concentrated, his brow furrowed in concentration. The seconds ticked by like hours, each one filled with uncertainty. "Caden," Ryan began, but Caden held up his hand, silencing him. "Just a little longer," Caden urged. Finally, the screen flickered. The ship's systems buzzed with activity as Caden managed to lock onto the signal directly without any interference. A low hum filled the room as the systems powered up. The ship's lights flickered back to life, and the hum of the engines returned. But then something changed. The voice spoke again, louder this time, almost as if it were coming from inside Caden's mind. "Caden Korr, you have come. You are not alone." The words sent a chill through him, deep into his bones. "What the hell was that?" Ryan said, his voice shaky. "It's talking to you, directly." "I think it knows me," Caden whispered, his hands trembling. "It's like it's been waiting for me." Captain Torres stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Caden. "What do you mean? What's going on, Caden?" "I don't know yet," Caden said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I think the entity is trying to communicate with me, and I think it's been watching us." Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered again. This time, the rumbling was different, deeper, more intense, as if the very fabric of space was warping around them. The room fell silent as everyone exchanged uneasy glances. It wasn't over. In fact, they had only just begun to understand the true nature of the force they were dealing with, and whatever it was only getting started. The ship was no longer drifting in space. It was being pulled, dragged like a helpless fragment of debris, caught in the gravitational grip of something far beyond their understanding. The Horizon 7 shook with each passing second, its hull groaning as the unseen force tightened its hold. The lights flickered erratically, casting brief shadows that danced like specters across the walls. The hum of the engines, which had once been a comforting background noise, now seemed like a distant, haunted whisper. Each second felt like an eternity. Caden Korr sat at the control panel, his fingers trembling over the keys. The voice, the same voice that had spoken his name, was still there, in the back of his mind, growing louder with each passing moment. Caden Korr. The voice reverberated through his mind, but this time it was different. It was more insistent, more urgent. "You must understand. You have been chosen." He shook his head, trying to focus. Chosen for what? He couldn't understand the message fully. It was like trying to grasp water with his bare hands, slipping through his fingers. Captain Elena Torres stood next to him, her expression hardening as she watched the readings on the console. "We're losing control of the ship, Caden," she said, her voice laced with urgency. "The core is unstable. If we don't get power back, we'll be dead in the water. And even if we do regain power, it's not guaranteed we'll be able to fight whatever is pulling us in." Caden didn't answer immediately. Instead, his gaze remained fixed on the flickering displays, searching for some sort of solution. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. The entity had been manipulating the ship's systems for days now. But the power drain, it wasn't just mechanical. There was something intelligent behind it, something that was actively reaching out to him. "We need to disrupt its connection to the ship," Caden said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "If I can access the central node, I might be able to cut off its control." "You think that'll work?" Captain Torres asked, her tone skeptical. "What if it retaliates?" Caden's fingers hovered over the console. "We don't have any choice. If we don't act now, it'll be too late." Without waiting for a response, he began working furiously, navigating through the ship's complex network of systems. He could feel the presence of the entity as if it were standing just behind him, watching his every move. It was watching them all, manipulating the ship, tightening its grip on their fate. As Caden accessed the central node, a low hum filled the room. The ship seemed to respond to his actions, as if it were alive, conscious. He could feel it, the presence that had been haunting him for days, pushing against him, trying to block his progress. "Caden, what are you doing?" Ryan Davis, the chief engineer, called out from across the room, his face pale. "You're tapping into the core systems. If you mess up, it'll—" "I know what I'm doing," Caden snapped, cutting him off. "Just trust me." For a moment, there was silence. The only sound was the rhythmic hum of the ship's failing systems. Then, suddenly, a shockwave of energy slammed into the ship. The walls rattled and the lights flickered violently. "Hold on," Captain Torres shouted as she grabbed hold of a nearby console. "We're going to lose it." Caden's heart raced as he fought to maintain control. He couldn't let go, not now. The entity was angry, pushing back harder than ever. The ship groaned in protest as if it too was trying to resist. Suddenly, the console in front of Caden flared to life, showing a massive surge of energy. The connection, it was breaking. "It's working!" Caden shouted, his voice filled with relief. But the relief was short-lived. The ship shuddered once more, and then something else happened. Something he hadn't anticipated. A voice. The voice was louder now, no longer just in his mind, but in the very air around him. "You have made a mistake." The voice was deep, resonating through the walls, vibrating in his bones. It wasn't just speaking to him now. It was speaking to everyone. "You cannot escape me." The words sent a chill through Caden's body. He looked up at the others. The crew was staring at him, wide-eyed, terrified. "What is that?" Ryan whispered, his voice trembling. "We're not alone," Caden said, his eyes narrowing. "And we never were." Before anyone could respond, the ship lurched again, and the console in front of Caden exploded in a flash of sparks. He stumbled backward, his ears ringing from the blast. "No!" Caden shouted, trying to regain his footing. But it was too late. The voice had intensified, its power now completely overwhelming. Suddenly, the external hull of the ship was covered in blinding energy, a wave of pulsating light that engulfed the entire vessel. The crew screamed, trying to hold on to anything solid, but the force of the energy was too powerful. "You cannot defy me." The voice echoed again, this time more triumphant, more certain. Caden gasped for air, his mind racing. This entity, it wasn't just trying to communicate anymore. It was controlling them, trapping them. The ship was no longer in control of its own fate. The Horizon 7 had become a vessel of the unknown, floating in a sea of darkness, a prisoner to a force it could not escape. For a moment, Caden felt the overwhelming weight of it, the knowledge that they were caught in something far beyond their understanding. They weren't just lost in space anymore. They were at the mercy of something ancient, something powerful. "Caden, we need to do something now," Captain Torres shouted, her voice panicked. But Caden didn't have an answer. He had tried everything. They had tried everything, and now they were completely helpless. The entity was in control, and they were trapped. The air inside the Horizon 7 felt thicker now, as if the very ship itself was holding its breath. The lights flickered sporadically, casting long, jagged shadows that made every movement feel like it was being watched. The constant hum of the failing systems had become a haunting presence, a reminder of just how fragile their situation was. The crew was on edge, unsure of how much longer they could endure the power of the entity that had seized control of their ship. Caden stood in the center of the command room, his mind reeling. He had thought that cutting off the entity's connection would give them a fighting chance, but instead, the alien force had only responded with more aggression, pushing back harder than ever before. "You cannot defy me," the voice had echoed through their minds again, stronger and more powerful than before. It was clear now that the entity was not just trying to communicate. It was in control, and it didn't want them to leave. "We can't keep going like this," Ryan Davis, the chief engineer, said, his voice strained. "The ship is barely holding together. Whatever's happening to us, we can't fight it. We're running out of time." Caden didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on the central console, where the glowing patterns of the alien signal were still flashing intermittently. The entity's presence was so overwhelming that it felt like the walls were closing in, as though they were trapped in a cage they couldn't see. "Caden," Captain Elena Torres said, stepping closer, her face a mixture of frustration and fear. "We need a plan. The longer we're here, the more we risk being pulled deeper into whatever this thing is." "I know," Caden replied, his voice tight. "But I don't know what it wants. It's not just controlling the ship. It's controlling our minds. Every time I try to break its hold, it gets stronger." "Then what are we supposed to do?" Captain Torres demanded. "We can't keep waiting for a miracle. We need to do something now." Caden took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the console. He had tried every technical approach he knew. He had attempted to sever the connection, disrupt the signals, and isolate the source of the interference. But each time, the entity seemed to adapt, learning from their actions, staying one step ahead. Suddenly, a thought struck him. He paused, staring at the console, his mind racing. What if the entity wasn't trying to stop them? What if it was trying to communicate? "Caden?" Ryan asked, his voice breaking through his thoughts. "What's going on?" "I think I've been going about this all wrong," Caden murmured, almost to himself. "We're treating it like an enemy when maybe it's trying to speak to us. Maybe it's been trying to reach me all along." Captain Torres exchanged a look with Ryan, who both seemed uncertain. "You think this thing is trying to communicate with us?" she asked slowly. Caden nodded, his mind now clearer than it had been in days. "Yes, but not in the way we understand communication. It's not speaking the way we do. It's using something else, something beyond words, and I think I might be the key to understanding it." A heavy silence fell over the room as the crew absorbed his words. Caden could feel the weight of their gazes on him. He knew that they were desperate, that time was running out. But this wasn't something he could do alone. He needed their trust, their belief that he could somehow break through the barrier that had separated them from the entity. "We don't have much choice," Caden said finally. "I'm going to try again. This time, I'm going to reach out to it, not with force, but with understanding. I think it wants to make contact, and I think it's been waiting for me." Captain Torres nodded, her expression somber. "Then we'll help you, whatever it takes." Ryan, still hesitant, added, "If this doesn't work, if it turns on us, we're all done for." Caden turned to face him, his gaze steady. "I know, but this is the only shot we've got." The room fell silent once more as Caden approached the central console. He hesitated for a moment, then activated the communication system. The familiar hum of the ship's systems filled the room, but this time it felt different, as if something had shifted in the air. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the entity's voice came again, echoing through Caden's mind. "You have come." Caden closed his eyes, steadying his breath. "We are here to understand you. We are not enemies. We are explorers." The voice responded, but this time it was different. The words were slow, deliberate, as if the entity were trying to translate its thoughts into something the crew could understand. "You are not enemies, but you are not like us. You have come seeking answers, but you do not yet understand what you seek." Caden's heart skipped a beat. The entity was aware of them, aware of their intent. It wasn't hostile. It was simply different, far beyond anything they had encountered before. "We only want to communicate," Caden said, his voice calm but firm. "We are human. We come from Earth. We want to learn." There was a pause, and then the entity responded. You are curious. You wish to learn. But your kind is young. You do not yet understand the consequences of your actions. Caden swallowed hard. This wasn't just about them anymore. This was something bigger, something that spanned across time and space. We only wish to survive, Caden said, his voice barely above a whisper. We don't want to harm you. You are not a threat, but you are an unknown. You do not belong here. The voice was softer now, almost sad. This place is not for your kind. Caden felt the weight of the entity's words settle over him. The voice wasn't threatening them, it was warning them. But what was the real danger? What do you want from us? Caden asked. Nothing. The voice paused as though it were considering its next words carefully. I have been here for eons. You are but a fleeting moment in time. Caden frowned, trying to make sense of the words. Then, why now? Why contact us? The voice hesitated before answering. Because you have found me, and now you must decide. Caden's pulse quickened. Decide? You must decide whether you will leave this place or whether you will become a part of it. The voice faded, leaving only the hum of the ship's failing systems. Caden? Captain Torres's voice broke through the silence. What did it say? Caden took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly. It's giving us a choice. It wants us to decide whether we leave or become a part of it. The Horizon 7 drifted silently in the abyss of space, suspended in the cold, indifferent vacuum that stretched out endlessly before them. The voice of the entity, Orion, still lingered in Caden's mind, reverberating with its final words. You must decide whether you will leave this place, or whether you will become a part of it. Caden stood alone in the command center, staring at the darkened view screen, his mind racing. The ship was still, and the crew was silent, each of them struggling to comprehend the enormity of the choice they were now faced with. The voice had offered them no clarity, only a cryptic ultimatum. The entity didn't want to destroy them. It didn't want to engage them in battle. Instead, it had given them a choice, to leave or to become part of the unknown. But what did that mean? What would it mean for them to become part of it? Was it a trap? Or was it some kind of ancient, vast intelligence that saw them as nothing more than fleeting moments in the cosmic timeline? Caden ran his hand over his face, trying to push aside the growing uncertainty. He had to think, to make a decision. Behind him, Captain Elena Torres entered, her face as worn and drawn as his. The weight of their situation was beginning to wear on her, but there was a fire in her eyes, one that Caden recognized. The fire of someone who wouldn't go down without a fight. We need to talk, Captain Torres said, her voice low. You heard the voice too, we all did. So tell me, what are we dealing with here? Caden turned to face her, his brow furrowed. I think it's alive, in a way we can't fully understand. It's been waiting for us, watching us, and now it's giving us a choice. Torres looked at him sharply. A choice? What do you mean by that? It doesn't want to destroy us, Caden said, his voice trembling. It wants us to join it, to become part of it. She stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. What the hell does that even mean? How do we even know it's telling the truth? What happens if we do become part of it? Caden shook his head, a deep sense of dread settling in his stomach. I don't know, but I think it's not just some alien force. This thing, it's ancient. It has existed longer than we can imagine, and it's not interested in domination. It's interested in assimilation. Assimilation? Ryan Davis's voice came from the doorway, his voice tinged with disbelief. He walked into the room, wiping the sweat from his brow. You're saying we'd be, what? Absorbed? Like we're some sort of test subjects? I don't know. Caden's voice cracked with uncertainty. Maybe, maybe not. It's offering us a choice, but it's not clear what that means for us. It's not clear what will happen if we accept. We don't even know if we can survive here, Caden, Ryan added, his voice desperate. The ship systems are barely holding up. If we stay here much longer, we'll lose everything. Even if this entity isn't hostile, it's draining us. It's too much. Caden's heart tightened. He understood. But leaving, that felt like running away from something far bigger than just their lives. What if this was their only chance to understand the unknown? What if leaving meant losing the chance to connect with something that could change humanity's understanding of life, of the universe? What if it's not about survival anymore? Caden asked, his voice softer now, almost to himself. What if it's about something greater? The room fell silent. Captain Torres crossed her arms. Her eyes narrowed as she considered his words. Then, after a long moment, she spoke. Caden, I don't know if we're ready to make that kind of choice. You're talking about becoming part of something we don't even understand. That's not just a decision for us, it's a decision for humanity. And I don't think we're the ones who should be making it. Caden sighed, looking at the crew. They were all so different people with different backgrounds, different hopes. But now they were all bound by this same terrible dilemma. He looked down at the console again, his fingers hovering over the buttons. The entity, Orion, had given them an option: to leave or to join, to become part of the entity's existence or to break free. But what was the cost of breaking free, and what would they lose by choosing to stay? Suddenly, the ship shuddered again, the lights dimming further as the system flickered. A new sound filled the air, a low, rumbling hum, almost like a heartbeat, coming from deep within the ship. Caden, something's happening, Ryan said, his voice laced with alarm. The core, it's going critical. Caden's heart skipped a beat. What does that mean? We don't have time to. The ship lurched violently and an unearthly scream echoed through the hull, a sound that seemed to reverberate not just in the ship, but in their very souls. Everyone, hold on, Captain Torres shouted, her voice urgent. We're being pulled in. Caden's mind raced. The entity wasn't just offering a choice, it was forcing their hand. The energy that had once been a passive pull now felt like an overwhelming drag, as though the ship was being drawn into a massive gravitational force. The walls of the ship seemed to bend, twisting and warping under the strain. This is it, Caden said, turning to the crew. We don't have much time left. We need to make a decision, now. Captain Torres grabbed his shoulder, her grip firm. Caden, you're the one who understands this. What do you think? Should we stay and risk everything, or should we get the hell out of here? Caden looked out at the view screen, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the entity wasn't just playing games, it had made its intentions clear, and he knew they didn't have the luxury of time to ponder every detail. We can't run from this, Caden said, his voice resolute. Whatever it is, we have to face it. We have to decide if we're ready to take the next step. As the ship continued to shudder and groan, the hum from within grew louder. The ship's core was on the verge of failure, but something about the way the entity was communicating with them made him realize that they couldn't turn away. Not now. It was time to make the choice. The Horizon 7 groaned under the pressure. The ship's core was approaching critical failure, its systems barely functional. Sparks flew from exposed circuits, and the walls of the ship shuddered violently, as if in protest. But even with everything falling apart around them, there was an unsettling calm in the air, a sense that they were no longer in control of their fate. Caden Korr stood at the command center, his hands gripping the console tightly. His mind raced with the implications of what had happened. The entity, Orion, had given them a choice. They could either leave, break free from its pull, or they could become part of it, a choice that seemed to promise something beyond their comprehension. Become part of it. The words echoed in his mind, haunting and ambiguous. What did it mean to join something like this? What kind of existence was the entity offering them? Captain Elena Torres stood beside him, her face tight with concern. Caden, we need to make a decision, she said, her voice low. This is it. If we don't act soon, the ship will be completely incapacitated. We'll never have another chance to escape. I know, Caden said, his voice distant. But leaving, what if we miss the chance to learn something beyond our understanding? What if this is the next step for humanity? We don't even know what it is, Ryan Davis, the chief engineer, said, his voice shaking with frustration. All we know is that it's been manipulating us, draining the ship's power, and now it's forcing us to choose between death and becoming part of it. Caden's fingers hovered over the console. He had tried everything, every technical method to regain control, every desperate plan to sever the connection between the ship and the entity. But nothing had worked. Orion had remained one step ahead, adapting to every move they made. Maybe we don't have to sever the connection, Caden said, almost to himself. Maybe the only way out is through it. Torres turned sharply toward him. What do you mean by that? Are you suggesting we give in to whatever this thing is? Caden looked her in the eye, his expression conflicted. I'm not saying we give up. I'm saying maybe we can communicate with it. Maybe if we understand what it is and why it wants us to stay, we can make an informed decision. We don't know what kind of power it holds or what it could offer us. Ryan spoke up, his voice laced with disbelief. Are you seriously considering this? We're talking about an alien entity, something that can manipulate reality. Are we really going to trust it? Caden's eyes darkened. I don't know what else we can do. We're already out of options. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence, the hum of the failing systems echoing through the ship like a countdown. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, each person wrestling with the same question. What should they do? Suddenly, the voice returned. It wasn't just a whisper this time. It was loud, forceful, and inescapable. You have decided. The words resonated in the very fabric of the ship, vibrating through the walls, shaking the crew to their core. You have come to the threshold. Now you must choose. The presence of the voice felt more real now, almost physical. It pressed in on them, and the lights flickered again, the temperature in the command center dropping as if the entity were shifting the atmosphere itself. Caden swallowed hard, his throat dry. What do you mean we've chosen? We haven't made a decision yet. You have chosen by seeking knowledge. The voice was patient, yet unmistakably certain. By understanding. You have already chosen to confront what is unknown, to face what is beyond your reach. You wish to transcend your limitations. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Caden felt a wave of understanding wash over him. The entity wasn't just offering them a choice, it was guiding them, testing them. Captain Torres's voice broke through the silence, her words measured and deliberate. But we don't understand what you want from us. What happens if we accept? What happens if we don't? The entity's voice softened, almost gentle. You will transcend the confines of your world. You will become one with the eternal. Caden felt his pulse quicken. Become one with the eternal? The words were enticing, powerful. It was an offer of something beyond human understanding. But at what cost? We're human, Caden said, his voice firm, though he was shaken. We can't just give up our humanity. We can't just let go of everything we are. You will not lose yourselves. The voice reassured them, though it carried an undercurrent of something much darker. You will evolve. You will be part of something greater. The silence stretched on, and Caden felt the weight of the decision hanging in the air. The crew was waiting for him, for a decision. He could feel the pressure building, the undeniable pull of the entity wrapping around him, pulling him toward the unknown. But what if this wasn't a gift? What if it was coercion? The entity had been subtle, persuasive, but now it was clear. It wanted them to join it. I don't know if we can trust it, Ryan said quietly, stepping forward, but we don't have much of a choice. If we try to fight it, we'll die here. If we accept, at least we'll have a chance at survival. Caden turned to face the rest of the crew. He could see their fear, their uncertainty, their need for hope. The choice wasn't just his anymore. The crew had already been pulled into this fate, whether they liked it or not. Maybe we don't have to fight it, Caden said slowly, his voice growing stronger. Maybe we need to understand it, to be part of it. Captain Torres's eyes met his. And what happens if it's all a lie? What if we become its slaves, lost to it forever? I don't know, Caden admitted, but we'll never know unless we try. As the room filled with an almost palpable tension, the voice spoke again. This time, its tone colder. The decision is yours. There is no turning back. The weight of the decision hung in the air like a dense fog, suffocating the crew with its presence. The Horizon 7 drifted in the cold abyss of space, its systems barely functioning, every creak and groan of the ship a reminder of how fragile their situation was. But the most pressing question now was whether they would choose to accept the entity's offer, or whether they would try to escape, leaving the unknown behind. Caden stood alone in the command center, his eyes locked on the view screen. The distant stars seemed to flicker in time with the low hum of the ship's failing systems. The presence of Orion, the entity that had controlled their fate for so long, lingered in the background, palpable and overwhelming. The decision is yours. The voice echoed through the ship again, its tone firm, unyielding. You will choose whether to leave or to join me. The path is clear. The crew stood gathered behind Caden, their expressions a mixture of fear, hope, and uncertainty. They had already heard the entity's offer. They had felt the pull. They knew that time was running out, and yet the decision seemed impossible. "We can't keep putting this off," Captain Elena Torres said, her voice firm. "We have to decide. If we stay, we risk being absorbed into whatever this entity is. If we leave, we risk death. But we can't remain in limbo forever." Caden turned to face her, his expression torn. "I know, but what if joining it means losing ourselves? What if it's not just about surviving? It's about becoming something we can't control?" Captain Torres nodded, her eyes clouded with the same uncertainty that Caden felt. What if it's the other way around? What if leaving means the end of everything we've worked for? We're already trapped in its grip. Staying might be our only chance at survival. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of their collective fear. The ship shuddered again, a low rumbling that seemed to come from the very core of the Horizon 7. The sound was like a heartbeat, steady and relentless, a reminder that their fate was already sealed. "We're running out of time," Ryan Davis, the chief engineer, said, his voice strained. "If we don't make a choice now, the ship will collapse under the pressure. The core is unstable, and the energy readings are off the charts. We won't last much longer." Caden looked at his crew, each of them with their own fears and doubts, but all of them relying on him to make the decision. It was no longer just about survival, it was about what kind of future they would have. "I can't make this decision alone," Caden said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "But if we stay, if we accept this entity's offer, we'll never know what we're giving up. We'll never know what it really wants from us. And if we leave," Captain Torres asked, stepping closer to him, "if we leave, we're still alive," Caden said, his voice low. "But we may never get another chance to understand the truth, and if we die out here, alone, we'll never know what we could have learned." The room fell into a long, heavy silence, the only sound the distant hum of the ship and the soft whispers of their own thoughts. The choice was unbearable, but they knew that they couldn't avoid it any longer. Suddenly, the voice of Orion spoke again, louder this time, reverberating through the walls of the ship. "You have made your choice. Now you must accept your fate." Caden's heart raced as the ship began to vibrate more intensely, as if the entity itself was reacting to their decision. The lights flickered once more, and the crew braced themselves for whatever was about to come. "We have to make a stand," Caden said, his voice steady. "We're human, and we've faced the unknown before. We can't let fear control us. We can't let it define us. We choose to leave." The crew exchanged nervous glances, but in the end they nodded in agreement. It was the only choice they could make: to break free, to reject the unknown, and fight for their survival, even if it meant leaving the mysteries of the universe behind. "You choose to leave, then?" The voice was almost mocking now, as if the entity were disappointed by their decision. "You will never know what could have been." Caden held his ground, his face resolute. "We don't need to know. We just need to survive." Without another word, Caden turned to the control panel and began reactivating the ship's engines, trying to force the Horizon 7 back into some semblance of control. The systems whined in protest, but slowly, painfully, they began to respond. The ship's engines sputtered to life, a weak but desperate rumble filling the room. "Caden, it's working," Ryan said, his voice filled with disbelief. "We're breaking free." But just as they thought they had gained some ground, the ship lurched again and the lights went out completely. The hum of the engines stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then a massive shockwave of energy slammed into the ship, throwing everyone to the ground. "You cannot leave." The voice was no longer calm or patient. It was angry, a cold and terrifying tone that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ship. "You will stay." Caden's breath caught in his throat. The ship was being pulled back, the entity's power tightening its grip once more. The energy readings went off the charts, and the core began to heat up dangerously. "We need to go, now!" Captain Torres shouted, but the ship's systems were failing. The entity's influence had become too strong. As the Horizon 7 was dragged toward the entity, Caden stood frozen, his mind racing. They had chosen to escape, but the entity was not letting them go so easily. "You are mine now." The voice reverberated throughout the ship, a promise, or perhaps a warning. Caden felt the weight of the decision settle in his bones. They were trapped. They had made their choice, but now they had to live with the consequences. Their fate was no longer theirs to control. And in the end, they would face whatever awaited them, whether it was a future of unity with the entity or an unknown darkness that they could never escape. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the stars. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you never miss an adventure. Your support helps us bring more content like this to life. Leave a comment below and let us know. What would you choose if you were in Caden's shoes? Until next time, stay curious and remember, the universe is full of wonders waiting to be discovered.